We are on the eve of the roster cut deadline, and you guys have questions. So let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can get $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. What is up, everybody? This is Jake Arthur and Zach Hicks at HorseshoeHuddle.com, joined by our pal, very special guest today, Joel Erickson of the Indy Star. What is up, brother? Thanks for coming back to the show. It's been a hot minute.
Yeah. Glad to get some time in here. Nice little interlude from the rest of what happens these first 2 days of the week.
Oh God, yeah, very, very distracting. Today, obviously we're on the eve of roster cuts, the 4 p.m. Tuesday deadline. Colts have already started to chip away at their roster to getting from 91 down to 53 players. And so today we thought it would be good to take some of your questions, see what you guys are wondering ahead of the deadline. So we'll go ahead and just dive right into it. So the first one, honestly, this is from me, but I figured it's one that a lot of people are going to be asking because today the NFLPA rejected the rule change to have your emergency quarterback come off of your practice squad, and you can bring them up and down throughout the season. They have to be on your 53-man roster now. So it essentially reverts back to what it was. And so I'll present this to you guys. Does that make Sam Ehlinger a lock for the 53-man roster?
Yeah, no, I think it does. And honestly, I'm going to have to fight Mike Chappell next time I see him now, because I was going to have Sam Ehlinger on my 53 until he even mentioned the rule change a couple days ago. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let me leave Sam Ehlinger off of my roster now. And then, leave him off the roster and have him on the practice squad. But now they revoked it or vetoed it or whatever, like the day before. Like, great timing by the NFLPA here. And yeah, I think Ehlinger is a lock to make the team again. So Sam Ehlinger, 4 years, 4 years now? I think Jason Bean had a great camp, but like, you guys were there every day. Like, he wasn't getting snaps over Sam in camp. Like,
no,
I can't see a way where he did enough to beat out Sam, even though he had a fantastic preseason, like really, really fun preseason. But like, Sam's going to be QB3, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about an emergency quarterback too is like, I actually don't think you really want that to be a developmental guy, because like, you want somebody who's if you can do it. I mean, not everybody can do this just because there's not very many quarterbacks. But if you're going to have an emergency quarterback, you think about the situation that would take for them to go in. Like, okay, Jason, let's just throw the hypothetical out there. Okay, Jason Bean, Anthony Richardson went down in the middle of the first quarter. Joe Flacco went down in the middle of the second. Run the game plan in your first NFL action ever.
Right.
You know, that's honestly, to me, that's almost like just having like nice. I mean, you could have a better passing, but it's kind of like you're kind of making him do what you'd be making a wide receiver do. Whereas Ehlinger has started games and played games in the NFL, and obviously, like, his strength is that he knows the offense. So I think that, yeah, I have no quibbles with Chap. I will never have quibbles with Chap. But Tom Pelissero and I will have words. He'll be like, listen, man, my last roster projection posted like 6 hours before you sent that tweet. You couldn't do that on Sunday where I could change it.
Yeah. No,
yep, I was working on mine, and then I was like, oh, let me go ahead and put Sam back on there, and who do I take off now?
I really think it's like a weird thing for Sam too, because like, he kind of acknowledged it in one of the preseason games. I was like, this is a different situation. He's like, yeah, it's unique. Like, 'cause he wasn't really competing against a person. He was competing against just the roster numbers in general. It's a weird spot to be in.
Mm-hmm. All right. So this next one, we'll start to get into the spicy stuff, I guess. Name one surprising cut from both sides of the ball. Now, Zach and I had discussed this a little bit. I do think there are a handful of guys who it's highly, highly unlikely, but you could put together a scenario where it happens, where one of these guys gets cut. And then there's a couple of them where it's just like performance-wise, based on merit, maybe they could be cut, but there's too many ties to, the front office or their draft spot, whatever it is. So go ahead, Joel. You can lead us off on this one.
Surprise cut on defense, Ronnie Harrison. Did I get it right?
You nailed that one, buddy.
Real quick. That was like going to be the one, man. Like, and they took it from us early on that one.
Somebody said that to me at practice last week. And it was exactly what you're describing. I was like, you know what? I can see that.
Yeah.
But I still didn't necessarily think that would happen with the safeties. Surprise cut. I mean, does Taven Bryan count defensively?
So here's the thing. Here's the thing. Jake was leaning that by saying guys who have too many ties to the front office and we don't think actually get like that's what Jake was saying in his question there. I hope, man. I hope. But do you guys actually think it happens? Like, do you think it actually happens?
I almost put him back on in place of Harrison when I messed with my roster projection. I almost put Taven back on, just thinking surely Ballard's going to want the extra defense. I just don't see the point. I hate to put it that way. That's harsh, but I don't see the point when you have Raekwon Davis there. And Adebawore had this great preseason and was much better than him through the preseason. Like what? How are you going to get snaps out of him?
That's my thing, and so I have him off of there for mine again because Ade took the steps forward that you hope to see him take this summer. So that's excellent. And, he's been playing 3 tech, which that's where Taven is supposed to play when the guys ahead of him at nose tackle are actually there. But then Raekwon Davis coming in at the 11th hour during training camp really kind of saved the situation for me. And then you've got on top of it, Tyquan Lewis can play inside as well. So can Dio. And I don't really know what Dio's situation is right now. He's been playing later into the preseason games, but it definitely seems like Tyquan and Latu kind of have the upper hand when it comes to snaps at edge, which maybe opens the door more for a guy like Dio to see more snaps inside this year. So those things together, and I'm with you guys. I'm like, what is the point? Because you have now seen you may be forced to play him out of position, and you just don't have to get yourself into that spot.
Yeah, and Tommy Law plays special teams too. Like if we're talking about the back end of the roster construction, I just don't see it. I don't, because you want these guys to have a role or some kind of thing, and Taven doesn't without an injury, to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, for sure. Taven obviously was the first one that popped in my mind, and one that I hope happens. Again, not trying to be too harsh, but like I'm a little meaner than Joel is on this show, I guess, when it comes to Taven Bryan. But Taven was the first one. I think whatever they do at corner kind of could be a surprise. Like if they get rid of a Darrell Baker Jr., who played a lot of football last year in favor of the young guys, or they cut the young guys in favor of Darrell Baker Jr., like they cut the Micah Abrahams or the Jalen Simpsons. You could see that because they just didn't really surpass Baker Jr. in camp, but they could still go with the younger guys. On offense, I don't really have anyone that I think is like maybe they already. Does who count?
Evan Hull.
Yeah, Evan Hull, I guess, is the one that would most work.
The most realistic, surprising one, I think, is Hull on offense.
Yeah. The one I was thinking was like if they already made up their mind they were going to take Woods over Mallory, and then the Woods injury, they're like, well, we'll still cut Mallory regardless and then just go get a veteran until Woods comes back. I don't think that happens now because Mallory knows the playbook. He's been here for a year, and it doesn't make sense to start over there at that 4th tight end. But maybe there. But yeah, I think offense is pretty set in stone. Like we know who the wide receivers are going to be. We know who the quarterbacks are going to be. We pretty much know the offensive line. Like maybe like a Dalton Tucker could sneak in there, but we kind of know the offensive line. So I don't think there's too many surprises coming on offense. Really, the big surprises are going to be at that cornerback spot and who they take at the bottom of the roster, because there's 4 or 5 guys fighting for 2 spots, and any of those 4 or 5 guys could be in those 2 spots there.
Yeah. So coming up next, you guys had some questions about specific players and how their seasons might transpire, and some eye-popping projections ahead here. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals who are right for the role. And that's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board either. They actually help you hire professionals who you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but who might be open to the perfect role elsewhere. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, then you are looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. They're constantly finding new ways to make the process easier, even recently launching a feature that helps you write job descriptions, which, let's face it, that's boring. If you can get help, that is awesome. So again, they make the process even easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And thank you guys for making Locked On Colts your first listen today. But for your second listen, please enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. This is, after all, the biggest week every year on the calendar for redrafts. So you gotta get all the resources you can to actually win your league this year. So again, check out Locked On Fantasy Football after this. All right, so some people are quite optimistic. You know, fandom is a special thing sometimes, and so got a question here specifically about Latu. This person is over the moon about Latu. So I'll start with their projection, and then I'll ask you, maybe what's a more realistic one. So 17 sacks for Latu as a rookie, en route to defensive rookie of the year, all pro, and a Hall of Fame career. So if we're looking at a crystal ball and projecting, that's beautiful. That's great. But obviously we got to center ourselves a little bit and just do one thing at a time. So me personally, I forget the number. It's either 26 or 36 rookies have reached double-digit sacks. So it's incredibly doable. It's not unheard of at all. It's been done recently even. So I will say, if I'm thinking of a number for Latu this year, and if I'm being optimistic, I keep going to 11.5. I think, as long as he stays healthy and has that consistent role in passing downs, I'll say that I could see him getting to 11.5, which may be enough for defensive rookie of the year. Because he is still the betting favorite for it. So it's not far-fetched. So what are you guys thinking on Latu's rookie year?
Yeah, 17's a little much. I love the thought process, though. I love the thought process. I encourage that thought process. Chris Ballard's drafted guys back in 2018, two dudes or whatever, who came out the gate, performing at a Hall of Fame level in terms of Shaquille Leonard and Quentin Nelson. So sure, that'd be awesome if Latu can do that too. But yeah, 9, 10, 11, even a little lower than that, 7 or 8, and just high pressure numbers. I could see that from Latu. And again, you guys were out there at camp every day. You guys were at those preseason games. From everything I've heard from you guys and everything I've seen on the preseason film, this guy looks ready to go. I know there were some backups that he was playing, obviously, in the preseason and stuff, but he looks ready to go. He looks really developed, looks very, very different from a typical Chris Ballard edge rusher, where they're all explosion, all power, all, get off, but don't really have that finesse down yet, where Latu appears to have a lot of the technical aspects of rushing the passer kind of down. And this isn't a super young prospect. This is a 24-year-old guy, or 23 turning 24-year-old guy who's been really productive the last 2 years in college. So, I think sacks are hard to project because a lot of luck comes into play when it comes to sacks. A guy getting a 20 sack season, a guy getting a 10 sack season could be similar productivity out of the guy just running into more quarterbacks that run their way or something. But I do think, something in that 9, 10, 11 realm, I think makes sense for him because he's more developed than most rookies are at this phase. And he looks ready to go from everything I've heard from you guys this offseason.
Yeah. Okay. So here's, I don't want to be the wet blanket, but you guys are going to make me. It is 36 players that have done 10. It's really only 5 in the last decade.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this. If you're a Colts fan, you're going to get excited when I read off these names of the 5 who've done it. Max Crosby had 10 in 2019. Joey Bosa had 10.5 in 2016. Josh Allen had 10.5 in 2019. Bradley Chubb had 12 in 2018. And then Micah Parsons had 13 in 2021. So if Latu does get to 10 sacks, I mean, that's as good a company as you could possibly keep.
Yeah.
I think more like the 8.5, 9 range is probably more realistic based on history, but I'm not saying that because I don't feel the same way. I'm just kind of going off of like what we've seen before. To Zach's point about him being different, he's different than anybody on this roster at all. And there's an element to his body and the way it moves where it's like almost like Gumby-ish. That's probably dated. I was trying to figure out if this was dated on the radio last week.
Well, you don't want to say water because Quiddy already said he moved like water.
Yeah. And it like, I don't know. It's like his hips and shoulders, the way I described it before, they like teleport away from the tackle while his feet are staying where they're staying pointed towards the tackle. So
Yeah.
That stuff is super exciting. Just, you look at the history of it and you're like, okay, I could see where. The other thing that could, I think, maybe hurt him is that they're going to play Tyquan Lewis a lot on rundowns, and that's going to maybe take a few like play action chances away from him.
Yeah. I still think Quiddy's going to end up with more sacks than him purely because Latu's going to force a lot of quarterbacks to run away from that backside right into Quiddy, who's just doing his 3-4 yards bull rush and just get set on that side of the field on the other end. And he's just going to have dudes run into him a lot and just, it's going to be a lot of sacks that way. So I don't really care what his sack numbers look like. Like, don't get me wrong. I would love him to hit double-digit sacks. As long as we're seeing consistent pressure and get off and him getting past his guy and forcing quarterbacks to make quick decisions, it could be a 2-sack season, but with, great pass rush win rate and stuff. And I don't care. Like sacks are very volatile as a number. They go up and down depending on luck. And I mean, we saw with, what was it? Yannick Ngakoue hit his 10-sack number here. And it's like, how many of those were high quality sacks? Like 2 of them? Like, it's not all sacks are created the same. So I think Latu's going to be fine.
If he gets the pressure numbers up to the point, like if he can lead the team in pressure numbers and get DeForest Buckner off of it, like I love DeForest Buckner maybe more than anybody, but you don't really want a defensive tackle to continually lead you in pressures. You would like an edge rusher to do that. So if he just does that, that would be a huge, huge upgrade on what they've had.
Right.
The good news is he went from putting Jake Witt through hell routinely at the beginning of training camp to doing it against the Broncos, the Cardinals. He's doing it against everybody now and against other teams. So it's luckily not that he's just doing it against the Colts. Like, it looks good so far, but we'll see how it looks once the regular season actually gets rolling. This next one is very timely based on the fact that the Cowboys just gave CeeDee Lamb, he broke the bank once again. Justin Jefferson became the highest paid non-quarterback in the league, and now CeeDee Lamb is sitting right behind him. So at Sodak Marco from Twitter said, is Michael Pittman Jr. the most team-friendly contract for a receiver in the entire NFL? And it's like just earlier this offseason it happened, and it's like 10 other guys got paid. So, I mean, I feel like Pittman got, appropriately paid. But even if it would have just happened like a couple months later or something, it feels like the price would have been driven up. But then you maybe get into a little bit of a standoff with the team where, I mean, look at it. Lamb just signed his contract, which means he's only just now going to be really fully reporting for duty to the Cowboys.
Yeah, I think like maybe when you account for timing, how when Pittman signed his deal, it wasn't to make him the highest paid wide receiver in football, which he didn't really have an argument to be the highest paid wide receiver in football because I don't think he even has a Pro Bowl under his belt at this point, doesn't have an All Pro or anything. So it's hard to make the argument for number one when you don't have those things. But he certainly was, I think he was like, 8th or something when he signed his deal, or like 9th when he signed his deal. Now he's down to 14th. So I don't know if I would say it's the best contract in football because whatever the heck Tyreek Hill's making, if he's not in that top 2, is probably the best wide receiver contract in football right now. But to get your receiver who's hit 1,000 yards the last 3 years, your number one guy, your bona fide guy who, fits this offense really well, especially with the RPO game that they run, it's a pretty great contract for the Colts. I mean, for him to be at 14th and that's your guy who's hitting 1,000 yards every single season, you couldn't be more happy about that, especially when by this time next year, he's going to be the 22nd highest paid receiver, 20th highest paid receiver in football. And that's just going to keep going down. It's really the whole reason why you want to extend these guys early and never do. I mean, I know they didn't get to Pittman super early or anything like that, but don't do what the Cowboys do essentially and wait until the last minute and lose out on $10 million a year like they did. Like the Colts didn't get to it super early, but they did hit it before free agency started, and it kind of saved them a couple bucks there.
I actually am going to go with, I looked it up while you guys were talking, and I didn't think I was actually looking for someone to be like, no, this is the best one. But if you throw out the rookie deals, I think it might be.
Yeah.
Like I get Zach's point on Tyreek Hill, but Tyreek Hill's making $30 million a year.
Not enough.
Which is a lot. There's 4 receivers whose average is 30 plus a year. It's Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyreek Hill, and I guess now CD.
Yeah,
and
CD
then
Lamb.
probably Jamar Chase after that. So I was looking down the list after that, and everybody else is either older or a slot guy, or I don't know. It's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, it's a great
deal. I don't know if
deal.
I have anything to add. I kind of surprised myself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like DJ Moore, I think, is making a couple more million than him per year now because he just signed his contract. Like I would have said maybe DJ Moore before he signed that contract. But yeah, I mean, it's a great deal for the Colts, and it's going to look even better the next 2 years. And I think I want to shout out Kevin Bowen, obviously, for having Pittman on his show and asking about that deal and how Pittman really talked about wanting to hit like getting a new deal every 3 years and re-upping there, but staying in a great scheme that accentuates your play so you can keep getting that paycheck, that new paycheck every 3 years. That's a great business decision by Pittman. I know he's kind of betting on himself there, but it could pay out more than maybe what some of these other guys are making to get $30 million now. Pittman might be helping his chances more in the future with those 3-year deals.
Yeah, without question. All right, so coming up here in a few, you guys had more questions basically about some of the Colts' needs from now on and what they might want to what they might want to look at across the league from outside. You guys have heard us talk a lot about FanDuel lately. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you from them. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel it anytime. So FanDuel has week 1. Obviously, the Colts are hosting the Texans, but the Colts are actually listed as 1.5-point favorites right now. Actually, nope, I lied. They are 1.5-point dogs to the reigning AFC South champions. I am always lying on the show. But the over-under is 48.5 points, so that could, kind of sauce up to be a really entertaining game. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Okie dokie, dudes. All right, so this next one is from @IvanBurden. Are there any end of the roster players you can see traded before the deadline? And Zach and I kind of cooked up an interesting one with this. Doesn't really have to be an end of the roster player, but Zach, is there anybody that you would like to throw out there real quick?
You're going to make me say, I don't know if Kennan's still listening at this point in the show, but
he is. He's locked in.
But like the only one that kind of makes sense from what we've seen this offseason, considering that he's one of the few guys who's going to be a free agent next year because the Colts have extended everybody else, Dio Dangbo kind of makes sense if you're going to trade anyone off this roster. The Colts are not a super deep team. Like you're not trading, like there's not many bottom of the roster guys that are trade worthy, at the very bottom. Like maybe like, no, I was going to say like maybe like an Isaiah Lamb, but like, why would you even do that? Like the only one I can see is Dio Dangbo. And the only reason he even comes to mind is because he was playing so late in that one preseason game. Tommy Waz had a really great offseason. And if you want him to be kind of that 3-tech on rushing downs, which I don't know if they trust him enough to surpass a Dio Dangbo. It doesn't seem like it's there yet, but maybe it could be. Then maybe you float Dio Dangbo around in trade offers, but you would really have to get something like decent back and feel very comfortable with Tommy Wah and Isaiah Land. So that's the only one that really comes to mind here. I don't think like you're not getting anything if you wanted to trade like a Blake Freeland or a Sam Ehlinger. Like if you really want to trade Ehlinger because Jason Bean wowed you that much, I don't think you'd really get anything for him. So Dio Dingbo is the only one who kind of comes to mind. And even then, I don't think it's very likely there.
So I had this conversation with somebody else. I think trading Dio would be irresponsible.
Yeah.
Especially after the injury with Ibacom. And actually the trades that Ballard likes to make, like I'm going to throw out a couple of the guys who've been traded at this time of year by Chris Ballard. Nate Hairston, Evan Boehm. They got Grant Stewart in this deal. Like we're much more likely to see like a 6th or 7th round pick swap or something. And so I'm going to throw a name right back out there, boys. It's Taven Bryan.
Hey,
that's who Jake mentioned before we recorded. Like, who's gonna want Taven Bryan?
I would have said the same thing about Evan Boehm, though. So
that's true. That's true. Or what was the?
Sometimes random dudes get traded.
What was that tight end they traded for Marcus Johnson? What was his name?
Where did
like
Johnson
Darrell
go?
something. It was from the Seahawks or something. Darrell something.
Darrell Daniels.
Yeah, Daniels maybe, or Darrell Daniels. Didn't they also trade that slow linebacker for Lindsey Pipkins from that corner?
Antonio Morrison.
Antonio Morrison for Lindsey Pipkins.
Wasn't there a Roland Martin trade or something in there too?
Yeah, there's a lot of names that pop up. I don't look if they can get something for Taven Bryan, guys. I get to do the reaction video to that, Jake, on the show here because that would be awesome.
Yes. So Ronald Martin. Sorry, not Roland. Ronald. Sorry to Ronald. They traded long snapper Thomas Hennessy to him in 2017 to the Jets for him in 2017.
All right. Taven Bryan, give us that conditional 7th round pick, baby.
I thought the Bears were going to be it because they didn't have tackle depth, and then I think they traded for former Colt Chris Williams instead.
Yeah, Chris Williams, who never played, only played 4 NFL games in his career.
Wagner.
Yep. Good preseason player, so I get it. But yeah, it'd be awesome if they could get something for Taven Bryan.
Oof. All right. With that, let's move on to the next one. Maybe our final one of the day. So this is honestly kind of a loaded question.
Yeah, I would say just cut Taven Bryan's the answer to all this stuff.
I like that one. So this one is from @GingerSportFan. What do you think the biggest difference is for both the offense and defense compared to last year? It could be scheme-based performance, new/lost players, whatever. Obviously, offensively, Anthony Richardson being out there is the biggest difference. Really, Anthony and Jonathan Taylor, and so far the offensive line is healthy because we know they only started 5 or 6 games together last year. But I think health is the biggest thing you can point at really to both sides.
Yeah, I mean, getting in an AD Mitchell and Anthony Gould and Ashton Dulin back, having actual wide receiver depth aside from it being all Pittman, all Downs, and sometimes Pierce now can be an AD Mitchell. Now a Gould can come in and play a couple snaps. Maybe a Dulin can get out there a little bit. It's not every single thing has to go through Pittman and Downs with the occasional, we don't know what's going to happen on this Pierce throw here. It could be incomplete or it's going to be a pass interference or whatever. So just getting that aspect at wide receiver, I think is a big difference. But like you mentioned, on offense, it's Richardson and Taylor. We didn't get to see any of that together last year. Just getting those guys out there. Taylor, I think they're going to feed him a ton this year. He's going to get so many looks on this offense. On defense, a whole year out of Grover Stewart would be awesome. Because I think impact wise, it's hard to really say that there's a player more impactful on defense than Grover Stewart because we saw what happened when he was out last year. Again, I had to bring everything back to Taven.
It all comes back full circle.
It all comes back to Taven Bryan. Raekwon Davis obviously is part of that equation as well, hitting him getting those rotational snaps. But yeah, I mean, I think the one more thing I want to throw out here, because we talked about it a little bit, Gus has been a little bit interesting this preseason. And I don't know, I know that, they've had other guys calling plays on both sides of the ball and stuff like that. But a lot of what the Colts defense has done this preseason has been too high stuff, quarter stuff, odd fronts, a lot of sim blitzes and mugging the A gaps and stuff on these blitzes. And it's I don't know if he's going to go back to just being Gus in the regular season, which he might. We very well could see that. but maybe he's got some tricks up his sleeve a little bit, for this season. I don't know. I don't really want to put too much pressure on Gus to change here because we know him well enough at this point where it probably isn't going to happen, but they did experiment a little bit with quarters and stuff last year. And I'm wondering if they make more of a change and more of an effort to do that this year based on what we saw in the preseason. So maybe schematically we could see some changes there to the defense.
I think it's impossible to get away from Anthony. Yeah, it's just impossible to get away from the difference that Anthony, just like the idea of a quarterback who will throw the ball down the field, a quarterback who can run, all the stuff he can do. I think it's impossible to really go with anything else. Although I do like that wide receiver depth point. That is good. Defensively, I might be Latu if I'm just looking for one thing, just like a true speed rusher. I think Zach, you've probably been in here in this spot, and Jake too, with me for a while. But I think it's like I was going on like 7 years of being like they need to get one of these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just, we heard it at wide receiver for a while. They need to get a separator at wide receiver, because they always had the Pierces and the Pittmans. And I know they had like the end of Hilton's career and he could separate a little bit, but like Zach Pascal's, like no separators, right? Then they finally got Downs, a guy who could separate. And it's like, oh, this is what it brings you. Latu's kind of like that, but like times 10 for the defensive line because it's more valuable than a slot receiver, obviously, in terms of like, oh, they finally got that finesse guy rather than just the Quiddies and the, these like the Taekwons and those kind of guys who are just good power rushers. Like they got that finesse guy who had the production in college. Like I'm with you, man. Latu can be a huge difference, especially, you have Latu, Buckner, and then whatever Pay and Dio can bring. Like that's a good pass rushing group right there.
And internally, as much as they like the sacks thing, they were pretty concerned about some of their pressure inconsistency.
Yeah,
that was really like a consistent theme coming out of there, which I mean that could just be Chris Ballard's obsession with pass rush, but I also think it's pretty true because I remember how angry so many people were in my mentions during games when they weren't getting there on every snap. So yeah, I think Latu might be the thing.
Yeah, they had 51 sacks, but they did go long periods of time where they weren't even touching the quarterback, and that can be problematic because you don't just want all your sacks and pressures and everything in gobs. I would add another maybe underrated element to the defense is I don't think they have as many things to like figure out on the fly, like having Zaire and EJ as your linebackers that are your linebackers. You don't have to do this dance with Shaq Leonard of what can we do. I think having that consistency in the middle, hopefully for them, will be a pretty big deal. All right, so I think that's it for us. Ran a little long today, but that's all right. Obviously, as always, if you guys have questions, throw them in the comments. If we have enough of them, we'll string together a whole nother episode. Remember to check out Locked On Fantasy Football after this. If you want to become a Locked On Colts insider, chat with us directly, get the inside scoop. Be sure to follow the link in our show notes. If you don't already, follow at Joel A. Erickson on Twitter, at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2. We're also on TikTok and Instagram as well. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. And we would love, love, love your ratings and reviews as well. Just be nice or it will hurt our feelings, guaranteed. And with that, you guys have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.